José Luis Lagunas, better known as El Pirata de Culiacán, a Mexican YouTuber, mocked the leader of a drug cartel in a video, and his fate was fatal. However, there are also heroes who confront such criminals head-on, like the Mexican journalist Azucena Uresti. She was threatened by a cartel for covering drug-related violence, but ended up being silenced by censorship in the country. Azucena Uresti is, without a doubt, one of the most respected and courageous journalists in Mexico, but her journey has not been easy. Over the years, the journalist has been a constant target of threats, attacks, and unfortunately, even attempts at silencing, all because she sought the truth in a country where the trade of illegal substances, corruption, and violence often shape the public narrative. Her career has become a reflection of the struggle for freedom of the press. In an environment where journalism is often controlled by powerful interests, including drug trafficking, Azucena began her career in journalism with the desire to make a difference, and throughout her journey, she has always stood out for her courage in addressing thorny issues that are often invisible to the public eye. Her investigative work has focused mainly on two issues that deeply afflict Mexican society: the clandestine industry of illicit substances and the corrupt relationships between cartels and local authorities. In a country where press freedom is constantly under threat, investigating the trade of prohibited products is, in itself, a risky act. The journalist became known for her work covering violence related to drug trafficking, the atrocities committed by criminal factions, and the abuses of power by authorities who, in many cases, are directly involved with these criminal networks. However, by exposing these connections, Azucena became the target of systematic violence, not only from cartels, but also from the system that, in many ways, allows such crimes to continue happening without major repercussions. In 2021, Azucena Uresti's life took a dramatic turn when she was threatened with death by an alleged representative of an illegal goods cartel. This was not the first time that journalists in Mexico faced direct threats from organized crime, but in Azucena's case, she became a specific target due to her incisive investigations and her prominent role in the media. This situation reflects the alarming reality faced by Mexican journalists, who often face the constant risk of physical violence, whether from cartels or other powerful groups that try to silence those who expose unwanted truths. These death threats were not an isolated incident, but rather a reflection of the climate of hostility experienced by many media professionals in Mexico, where, according to the National Human Rights Commission, more than 100 journalists lost their lives between 2000 and 2020. Drug trafficking, with its tentacles reaching into various spheres of power, represents one of the greatest sources of danger for those who dare to investigate this world. In addition to external threats, Azucena Uresti also faced increasing censorship pressure in Mexico. The country has historically been marked by a troubled relationship between the media and political power. The government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who was president in 2024, although he presented himself as a defender of freedom of expression, was also criticized for indirect attacks on the press, putting journalists in an even more vulnerable position. On several occasions, the former Mexican president himself clashed with journalists and media outlets, accusing them of distorting facts and manipulating public opinion. Azucena, in turn, was one of the journalists who found herself caught in the midst of these tensions, facing the dilemma of continuing to investigate with integrity or giving in to the pressure from powerful groups seeking to control what is said in the media. The government, on some occasions, has tried to discredit journalists who do not align with its views. Censorship in Mexico is subtle but real, with many journalists being pressured to self-censor in order to avoid reprisals or attacks from cartels and even from the political apparatus itself. Azucena Uresti, by addressing topics such as illicit trade, corruption, and abuse of power, has become a symbol of resistance, but also a victim of retaliation, both from criminal groups and from the very system that tries to maintain control over information. In January 2024, Azucena Uresti announced her departure from her program on Milenio Television, marking a milestone in her 20-year career as a journalist. The decision was explained by the journalist herself as a professional change, but her departure was surrounded by speculation. Many believed that her decision was related to external pressures, including the constant threat to her safety. In any case, Azucena made it clear in her farewell that, despite the difficulties, she would continue to work to defend freedom of expression and citizens' rights, wherever she might be. Mexico remains a challenging country for journalists, where the fight for truth is often overshadowed by violence and censorship. Lucy Cruz was an ordinary woman. She had a peaceful life before getting involved in the dangerous world of drug trafficking. But her choices led her to a sad and mysterious story. She ended up joining a cartel involved in illicit substances, which was far from the safest, and this ended up costing her dearly. Lucy Cruz, also known as La Cholita, started her life far from violence. She lived in Michoacán, a region marked by the presence of several drug cartels. But for some reason, she got involved with organized crime, initially becoming part of the La Nueva Familia Michoacana cartel, LNFM, and later the Los Viagras cartel. These cartels were in constant war against other criminal organizations, including the feared Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel, CJNG, led by Nemesio Oceguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho. In 2019, Lucy Cruz did something that would turn out to be a big mistake. She began openly provoking the CJNG on social media. In a video, she mocked members of the Jalisco cartel, calling them chickens, referring to the fact that, according to her, the CJNG's hired enforcers were running away from a confrontation with their rivals. She even joked about the weapons that had been left behind, insinuating that they needed more equipment. These provocations drew attention and increased the tension between the factions. Lucy was directly challenging one of the most powerful and feared cartels in Mexico, something that would later prove fatal. In December 2020, news began to circulate that Lucy Cruz had disappeared. What happened to her? Many people wondered. One of the most talked about versions was that she and other members of her group were caught off guard while they were resting. According to some sources, the Jalisco New Generation cartel attacked and captured Lucy and her companions while they were vulnerable. This would not be surprising, since with the CJNG being so violent and ruthless, many believed that she had been kidnapped and possibly executed. One of the strongest theories about Lucy's disappearance is that she was executed by the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Her mockery and constant challenges to the CJNG leader, El Mencho, were considered a serious insult. Several reports indicate that by getting involved in a war between factions, the reaction from the rival faction would be swift and brutal. The transcript of a video in which Lucy mocked members of the CJNG only increased suspicions that the cartels had taken her life in retaliation. However, not everything is clear about the fate of Lucy Cruz. An alternative theory emerged when a photo, which many believe to be of her, appeared on the internet. The image showed a woman with features similar to Lucy's, with a visible tattoo and other details that made many believe she was still alive. But to this day, there has been no concrete confirmation about what happened to her after her disappearance. The photo raised even more questions, as many experts question the authenticity of the image and whether it was really her. The disappearance of Lucy Cruz, La Cholita, remains shrouded in mystery. There is much speculation but little certainty about what really happened. The most likely scenario is that she became a victim of her own recklessness by challenging one of the most dangerous cartels in Mexico. But the photo that surfaced later and the various theories about her possible execution or survival continue to fuel the doubt. Rodolfo Marquez, better known by his influencer persona as Mexico's millionaire, Fofo Marquez, became famous for all the wrong reasons. On his social media, he flaunted a life of luxury with champagne baths, sports cars, and extravagant parties. But behind the ostentation and supposed fortune, there were controversies and behaviors that placed him at the center of serious accusations. From scandalous debts at a nightclub to being accused of attempted femicide Obrador, Marquez saw his fame turn into a nightmare, with consequences that included threats from one of the most dangerous cartels in Mexico. In July 2022, Fofo Marquez sparked outrage in Guadalajara by blocking traffic on the famous Matute-Remus Bridge. The influencer parked luxury cars on the avenue and blocked traffic to record a video. Laughing in the face of honking from angry drivers, Marquez declared that he was doing it because he could, thanks to the power of his money. The scenes went viral, sparking a wave of criticism. The case not only attracted the attention of the authorities, but also of a much more dangerous group, the infamous CJNG, which stands for Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Rumors of an alleged threat from the cartel began circulating on social media. The group reportedly warned Fofo that in Jalisco, the one in charge is El Mencho, the leader of the CJNG. Any attempt to repeat similar actions could have fatal consequences. The influencer tried to defuse the situation with a public apology, saying that his intention was only to create content, but the damage was done. His behavior had offended powerful people. Even before the threats in Guadalajara, Marquez was already known for questionable behavior. In 2024, he was accused by influencer Carely Luis after a night that started as a professional collaboration but ended in confusion. The two were at a nightclub in Mexico City, where Fofo insisted on paying the bill and encouraged Carely to order whatever she wanted. However, when he noticed the high prices, he began to show discomfort. The tension escalated when Marquez allegedly made the purchase of an expensive bottle conditional on receiving a kiss from Carely. After getting what he wanted, he abruptly left the place, abandoning the influencer and leaving her with a 60,000 peso bill to pay. Carely exposed the situation on social media, generating even more criticism of Fofo's image. However, his reputation had already gone down the drain even before this accusation. While Carely Luis was publicly criticizing Marquez, he was already facing a serious accusation of attempted femicide. The assault took place in a parking lot in Naucalpan on April 5, 2024. Security footage captured the moment when Fofo attacked Edith after a disagreement. The victim was found injured, with signs of assault on her body. A passerby recorded the aftermath of the attack, where Edith appears bloodied and visibly shaken. In the video, someone offers help and suggests taking her to the hospital, mentioning that they witnessed Fofo throw her to the ground and kick her. Fofo fled the scene immediately after the incident, but the circulation of the footage on social media generated major repercussions and public pressure. The next day, he was located and arrested by the police, who shared photos of the influencer smiling as he was taken to the police station. His behavior, considered mocking, generated even more outrage. After his arrest, Fofo was taken to Barrientos prison, where his legal proceedings began. During the hearings, he stated that he feared for his life, claiming that there was a price on his head inside the prison. The fact that a narcomanta, a public message specifically addressed to Fofo, had been left on a bridge with a serious threat quickly wiped the smile off his face. He even knelt before the judge, begging for mercy so he wouldn't have to stay in that place. During a hearing, Fofo lifted his shirt and showed bruises, claiming he had already been assaulted by other inmates. Reports from people close to the influencer indicate that he is facing extreme difficulties in prison. Information suggests that he was forced to pay around 50,000 pesos a week to ensure his safety inside the prison. In addition, belongings such as designer clothes and sneakers were taken from him by other inmates within his first few days of incarceration. Despite the difficult situation, Fofo continues to try to maintain some control over his public image. He requested permission to marry his partner, Melanie Latanzi, but the request was denied. During the hearing, Fofo argued that his human rights were being violated, but the authorities stated that the decision was subject to the prison's internal rules. Fofo's defense team is working on gathering evidence to try to mitigate the sentence. However, the influencer's history complicates his situation. The authorities consider it an aggravating factor that he practices boxing and jiu-jitsu, skills that further increase the severity of the injuries inflicted on the victim. According to the laws of the state of Mexico, the penalty for attempted femicide ranges from 13 to 46 years in prison. Meanwhile, Edith remained hospitalized, dealing with health problems related to the attack and the stress caused by the case. Her testimony will be crucial in the final trial, which is scheduled for the coming months. Fofo Marquez built his reputation on the internet through displays of wealth and controversial behavior, but his arrest exposed the fragility of that image. His account, which had nearly 4 million followers, is now closed, and many of his videos posted online have been deleted. Behind the eccentricities, there is an influencer now facing the consequences of his actions. Whatever the judicial outcome, Fofo's story is a reminder that in the real world, irresponsible behavior can have devastating consequences. José Luis Lagunas, better known as El Pirata de Culiacán, was born on April 28, 2000, in a very well-known place in Mexico, Culiacán, in the state of Sinaloa. This place is notorious for being home to many illicit substance traffickers. From a young age, José Luis lived in an environment where crime was a part of everyday life for many people. He grew up without his father around, and his mother, who was not very present, left him to be raised by his grandmother. Even though he was very young, he already had a life full of hardships and things that were not good for him. At just 15 years old, José Luis started to become famous on the internet. He recorded videos where he showed alcoholic drinks, luxury cars, and weapons. These scenes caught the attention of a lot of people. His videos were funny to some, but to others, they showed a life of excess. When he became El Pirata de Culiacán, the name he created for himself, he was already attracting more and more followers. At first, people thought he was just having fun, but soon it turned into something much bigger. El Pirata de Culiacán was having fun, but his fame started to grow quickly and unexpectedly. He became friends with other social media celebrities and members of Mexican regional music bands. He became known as the Alcohol Kid, but he didn't stop there. Even as his popularity grew, he wanted more. "I want to sing," he would say, but the path he chose to reach his dreams was not easy. He was entering a dangerous world. José Luis started getting involved with people from the criminal world, not realizing this could be his downfall. One of José Luis's biggest mistakes was thinking he could play around with the most serious things. In one of his most controversial videos, he made a joke about Nemesio Oceguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, one of the leaders of the most powerful illicit goods cartels in Mexico, the Jalisco Cartel. He challenged himself and mocked Oceguera, saying that he couldn't do anything to him. What José Luis didn't know was that this joke was putting his life at risk. He was messing with one of the most dangerous figures in the criminal world. On December 18, 2017, José Luis's life came to a tragic end. He was at a bar in Jalisco, Mexico, called Mentados Cantaros. In that bar, 4 armed men entered and went straight to José Luis's table. Without giving him a chance to defend himself, they shot him 15 times. The YouTuber did not survive. The execution of José Luis was a shock to everyone, but for many it was the consequence of the wrong choices he made throughout his life. His involvement with the criminal world and his lack of fear of the consequences ultimately came at a high price. When José Luis passed away, he left behind a legacy of fame on social media, but he also left a sad lesson. In his final days, he spoke in interviews about wanting to stop drinking and even change his life. But, as often happens with people who are immersed in a dangerous life, the problems and addictions were stronger than his dreams of change. His followers, who used to laugh so much at his videos, were now mourning the loss of a young man who, despite so many mistakes, still wished for something different. Don't forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this one.